Welcome back to the It's Just Sport podcast, Olympic bonus episode. We have a very special guest with us who's actually in Tokyo. We have Cathal Dennehy, Irish examiner, freelance journalist, all-around legend, and someone who I've been cyber stalking on Twitter because I'm trying to get as close to the action as I possibly can. The forum, Cathal, everything over there?
It's good. I've never been called an all-round legend before, so I think I need that title somewhere. I'll put that in my bio or something. Joanne O'Riordan says it.
Put it in your bios. Put it in your bios.
Exactly. It's good. Life is good here. It's busy. I've been here 2 weeks now, so I'm on this is day 15. So all the journalists are calling it Freedom Day. After your 14 days are up, before this, we could only go from like hotel to stadiums and stuff, which is obviously no complaints there. You're going to watch the best athletes in the world. But now we can, for the last 4 days I have here in between sessions and stuff, you can actually go around the shops and go to restaurants and see a few sites and things like that, which is good. So I have my freedom, but depending on how all the Irish fare, we're obviously sniffing medals again. So things get a lot busier in that scenario. So probably won't get too much time for tourism, but I'll do what I can.
Have you been enjoying the Japanese lifestyle? Because I was there about 6 years ago. And I had to say, as someone who's very lackadaisy and doesn't routine is kind of my thing, but like a time isn't really my thing. And I remember they were like 10 o'clock means 10 o'clock, Joanne, you have to be there. Like, how are you finding everything?
Yeah, the rule, it's definitely, I think everyone, I'd never been to Japan before, and everyone kind of talks about, it kind of makes it sound like it's really weird, and obviously it's not that weird when you're actually here. But I suppose everywhere is kind of like, tourist friendly during the Olympics with volunteers speaking English and all that. But it's I suppose what caught me a bit off guard was how particular they are with rules and stuff. It's like we're in an empty stadium at the Athletics, and there's like thousands of seats, but then there's certain seats are for photographers, and then there's certain seats for journalists, and there's no one in the photographer section, and you just go down there to take a picture at a podium or something like for 30 seconds, then you have some guy on you straight away just going, no, you can't be here. And then he like tapping you on the shoulder and going, go. And then I remember going to the opening ceremony, and there was all the roads were closed around outside the stadium. And, all the locals were standing there at this road that it's only like 5 meters wide, the road. And there's no cars for about 3 blocks, I would say, because all the roads are closed. And then the green man, it's a red man, and everyone's just standing there. And I'm kind of there. I'm like, what is everyone doing? Like, the roads are closed. So I just walk out into the road, and then some policeman immediately starts blowing his whistle and telling me to get back. So I get back in line anyway. And then some German photographer, like 30 seconds later, comes up beside me and walks into the road as well. And then he gets the whistle blown at him as well. So then the two of us just stood back and went, they take this very seriously here. Do not disobey the green man signal, even on a closed road that there's no car within half a mile. But that was kind of an example to me of how they love their rules over here. They certainly enforce them. But I think, again, it was also probably an indicator into why they've done really well with the pandemic in terms of not getting hit like Europe and America, because even though the laws they have here aren't like legally binding, they're kind of more advisory. Once they pass them down to the people, they're obviously very diligent at doing what they're told, probably in a way that we in Ireland wouldn't be.
I can remember I was over in Japan, and I remember they specifically told me that if I was going down those like flat escalators in my chair, that I couldn't take the inside lane, because the inside lane was for people getting to work and who were like rushing and like couldn't dare to be late. So I remember once I did happen to take the inside lane by pure accident, and my friend was at the top. She was like, "No, Joanne, what have you done?" And I was like, "Oh no!" And next thing I looked behind me, and I could see just a heap of Japanese lads like piling on after me. And I was like, "I'm dead. I'm actually going to die."
Yeah, my capacity for jaywalking is going to get me in trouble. I was walking back from the stadium as well there last night, and again, it was after midnight, no one on the streets, and I was just like, I'm not waiting 2 minutes here at this red man. And then some guy on a bike who was coming back started shouting at me. And I'm too used to it in Ireland, our lax rules. You're allowed to do different
These are going to be the stories that are making headlines. It'll be like, how many times has Cathal been caught crossing the road when he's not meant to be? Like,
yeah, I know.
They're probably marking you. They're probably marking you. They're going to be like, look, this is one time too many. We have to sort it out now. Tell us, what's the atmosphere and everything like over there? Obviously it's a different games than what people are used to, but it looks like there still is like excitement and the athletes are like performing and having a great time.
Yeah, it's better than I thought it would be. I mean, I suppose I've been around a few different venues and like it's kind of surreal because it's obviously just journalists. The swimming has a bit of an atmosphere. The gymnastics had a bit of atmosphere, but any atmosphere is generated by team members going to watch their fellow Olympians, I suppose. And, you don't get that many at the athletics. There's probably, I would say, maybe 300, 500 team members there every night. And obviously you probably have 500 to 800 journalists, but the no cheering in the press box rule kind of still generally applies, although not in all cases. And like, yeah, so I think, but the vibe around the city is it's very kind of muted. There's not much like advertising stuff with logos around the city. You'd walk around Tokyo and you wouldn't even know the Olympics were on in a lot of places, to be honest. Whereas, if you walked around London 2012 and obviously you remember from Rio, you'd see it everywhere, like that they're really proud. Here, I think there's probably a certain sense of guilt. And when the opinion polls a few months ago were so against it, that they probably said, right, let's tone this down, I suppose. Let's host it, but not shout about the fact that we're hosting it. But no, I think generally the tide has turned and like the ratings in Japanese TV are through the roof. They've never had ratings like them for the amount of people who are watching everything. And even been at the opening ceremony, there was a good few dozen, I'd say, or I don't know how many, but it was a small group of protesters who were very loud with megaphones, anti-Olympics protesters. But then there were about, I would estimate, about 5,000 people outside the stadium. And I saw some journalists on Twitter saying, 1,000 show up to Olympic protests. And I was like, this is such nonsense, because it's literally probably 50 people were protesting, and the other thousands, as you'd walk past them, they were like, waving flags and taking pictures, and they were just there to try and see the fireworks and see the opening ceremony and get as close as they could to it. And I think in that sense, I feel really guilty, or not guilty, but I feel a pity for the Japanese people, because, it's a massive financial hit to host the Olympics. They're not going to reap much benefit from it, having to watch it on TV. And the big benefit they would get back from all that money that's been plowed into it is getting to be part of the show. And now the only way they're part of it is unfortunately sitting in their own homes watching on TV. So I'm hugely thankful to them for hosting it, and I'm just kind of very sympathetic that all these beautiful stadiums they've built and all the work that's gone into it hasn't been rewarded with full stands.
Yeah, I think I heard somewhere, I think it was on the BBC, that...
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Go on, Niamh. It's my internet always. Go on, Niamh.
You're definitely delayed. You're definitely delayed today. No, I was just going to say, from their perspective, like it is, like you're saying, people are hugely thankful, obviously, that it has gone ahead. And I think there has been lots of excitement from all across the world to be able to obviously tune in to watch it, but also from the athletes' side to host it, because, it's a long way to, Paris from Rio. If it didn't go ahead, and obviously there's massive amounts of work have gone in from the athletes. We've seen loads of phenomenal things over the past week and a half, I suppose. But yeah, like I said, I have seen that as well, that the Japanese locals have been a bit more positive about it in recent times, and it does seem to be very well handled and under control. Tell us, what has been the most exciting moment for you so far? We obviously know you're a big athletics fan, so I'm sure it's probably going to reside there somewhere, and I'm pretty sure I can guess what one it is.
Yeah, I know. I know. There's no guesswork to be needed there, I suppose. It's the men's 400 meter hurdles final. And I think I felt kind of very sympathetic, almost. Like I went to the women's final yesterday, and it was myself and my friend, like Jared O'Donnell's his name. He's the Irish press attaché for the athletics team, and he's an elite hurdler himself. Like, and we were both sitting there going, "This is probably going to be a world record, isn't it?" And we were all like, "That's probably as good or better a race than the men's race yesterday and the women's race." But we were like, whoever does something second, it's like breaking the 4-minute mile, I suppose. If you're the second person to break it, or the second man to walk on the moon and stuff, it's just like you get so much less attention, because it's not the wow moment has been taken, and like what Sydney McLaughlin and Dalilah Muhammed and Femke did yesterday was just as good. But yeah, I think for pure wow factor, sitting in that stadium on whatever it was, Tuesday morning, I was there and I was watching it with a British journalist, and we were just like, oh my holy God, what have we just watched? And then I talked to Phelan Kelly, he's one of the Irish team coaches. He was over in the back straight, and he was just texting me and Jer saying, in our WhatsApp group, and just saying, that's the best thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And he said that to Warholm as well. He said, he leaned over the railings and just said, man, that's the best thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And Warholm said to him, well, it's the best thing I've ever done in my whole life. And then me and Gerb, we both genuinely said the same thing. Like, and like, you know, I've been, I suppose, a paying fan at a lot of things in terms of like, I've been to the odd Premier League game, a couple of Champions League games, and when I was in America, I went to see some NBA games and stuff. And like, I'd never, and I know I'm completely biased as an athletics geek, but I just, even in athletics, like I'd seen Usain Bolt win the World Championships and Mo Farah win at the London Olympics, and just lots of different brilliant kind of real atmospheric memories, you know, in full stadiums, and just nothing came close to that moment of just, you know, it kind of, you can get very cynical about the sport and cynical about the sport in general, I think, and the money and everything. But occasionally, and I think, I would say this as well, there are plenty of other athletes who I'd watch and think, as soon as I'd see a crazy time like that, I would go, oh, I'd roll my eyes almost and just go, this isn't real. I don't believe this. But with Warholm, being around the sport, you do get a very good sense. Like, you know, if you talk to someone like Thomas Barr, talk to coaches and agents, people generally have a very good idea of what's real and what athletes are doing it the right way and stuff. And the only vibe I've ever got about Warholm is that he's doing it the right way, you know, that there isn't cheating going on and that he is a really decent guy. And that's why I think as well, the fact that it was him who did it and Benjamin right behind him, who I'd say the exact same thing about, just to see that it was the kind of, I suppose, the moon landing moment for athletics, because, you know, 46.70 was the world record. For 29 years, the world record until Warholm did it this summer was 49 or 46.78. And just, you know, everyone in the stadium probably thought, okay, maybe 46.5, maybe in Dream World 46.4. And just like Roger Bannister, to see 45 flash up on the clock, everyone just was utterly speechless. And I'll be honest, I could never even imagine a moment like that happening again when I watch athletics, because it was just utterly jaw-dropping.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. There's been some really exciting results in the athletics. The 400 hurdles for the women as well, it was like fantastic. And I think just in both hurdles events at the moment, there just seems to be a couple of people that are just that step above the rest. Like, you know, kind of going into you know, the women's hurdles final, like you knew who kind of the top three were going to be, and it was really who's going to come 1, 2, 3 in what order, and it wasn't really a question about if anybody else was going to challenge them. Big fan of Femke Ball. Obviously she has only like switched, you know, to actually kind of running the hurdles like not so long ago, and she's like phenomenal. I just think she's amazing. And then she was obviously in that 4x400 meters relay as well.
Yeah, she's just like, I mean this in a complimentary sense, she's a monster. Like, you know, she's a monster of the 400 meters. She's just, I remember talking to her agent Caroline Feith at one of the meetings earlier this year, and just talking about the time she was running, the split she was running, and Caroline was just like, you know, Femke, it's funny when you talk to Femke, she has no idea how good she is. Like, she just thinks it's like, she's just okay. She's no ego. And then because she's so young, I think it's the kind of the joy of being so young is that you don't have that understanding of the history of the sport, whereby she doesn't think that 52 seconds for 400 meter hurdles is unbelievable. And it is absolutely unbelievable for someone who's basically just come to the event. And yeah, she's just, to watch her run, she's poetry in motion. I mean, you know, if you could manufacture an athlete, like when you're playing with Play-Doh when you're a child, like if you could manufacture like an athlete built for the 400 meter hurdles, you'd manufacture Femke Ball. Like, and yeah, the two Americans, Sydney McLaughlin and Dalilah as well, they're just generational talents. Like, and you know, I think a lot of people were going about the spikes in the track, and I do think that's always worth mentioning, because it definitely is a factor. But like, if it was the only factor or the big factor, then like the men's 100 would have been won in, you know, 9.5 the other night, and the men's 200 last night would have been won in 19.3 or something, or 19.4. The only two places we're seeing ridiculous times are in the 400 meter hurdles so far on the track. We've had a lot of finals, and the only thing you can put that down to is just this group of freakish talents all coming along at once.
I was interested, obviously, in asking you. Obviously, as someone who's not really, well, obviously my whole family are steeped in athletics, but, you know, I would be the oddball in that I prefer other sports. I was kind of interested, you know, we're obviously hearing all like it's a fast track, you know, the spikes, and then you Warholm coming out basically saying that he doesn't believe in kind of spikes and stuff like that. Can you kind of explain, I suppose, for like dumbasses like me, like what basically the difference kind of is and like what the impact is? And does it really have the big impact everyone says it's having, if that makes any sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. It's definitely having an impact. The further down the distances you go, the less impact in terms of the benefit for spikes, because basically World Athletics brought in rules that the thickness you can have in the sole of your spikes gets lower the further down the distances you go. So basically, if you give a lot of room for shoe engineers, like 40 in a marathon and stuff, you can have a 40 millimeter midsole. And I think on long distance events on the track, I think it's 25 millimeters. And then maybe the sprint, it's like 15 or 20. And just the less room you give them to engineer with, the less they can do with crazy amounts of foam and carbon fiber plates at certain angles and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's less pronounced in the sprints. But I do think it's probably given the Nike Super Spikes and that are probably given maybe a tenth of a second over 100 meters. They had a prototype that apparently was so crazy. It had a second external carbon fiber plate, but it was meant to have taken 0.3 of a second in testing off 100 meter times. That got banned, thankfully. And I think Puma and Usain Bolt's record Puma might have had a strong role in that being banned, because they very much did not want Bolt's record to be broken by an inferior talent, I would say, just due to spikes. In terms of tracks, then, I guess it's funny. It's actually good timing, because I've literally spent 20 minutes this afternoon talking to the international relations manager for Mondo, because basically for the World Athletics website, I'm writing a very nerdy feature on just what has gone into the manufacturing of this track. And it's essentially, tracks change all the time. Obviously, for 100 years they've been changing. They've been synthetic for the last 50 years or so, which basically means they've been rubber tracks for the last 50 years. And that kind of composition of that rubber has been getting more and more efficient over time. And this one is a layer of, I suppose what's different about this track as opposed to what was in Rio is that there's kind of the bottom layer of the track. It's 13 millimeters. There's 2 layers of rubber, and the lower layer is basically like a honeycomb shape. And if you imagine a honeycomb design, it has these little grids with air inside them. And the manufacturers say that when the foot hits the ground, that air compresses and obviously rebounds. So they say for force, something like he said, force generated or something is the same as the previous version, but energy return is much higher with this track. And that's what the athletes are saying as well. They said that when your foot hits the ground, it springs you forward. So it feels like a mini trampoline effect. They think it's 1% to 2% in performance. I think a manufacturer would claim that, because they're the world leader in manufacturing and they want to say our track's the best track. But I think I wouldn't say it's 1% to 2%, but I'd say it's probably maybe between 0.5% and 1%, I would say, just given what we're witnessing this week.
In terms of like those kind of technological advances, like what are your thoughts and opinions on that type of thing? Because obviously, like you're saying, Puma want to protect Bolt's record, but like, is it fair to compare? Like, it's not really comparing like to like when you have this progression, but obviously you look at cycling, like bikes change. Like swimming, it came a hard stop when it came to the the long suits, zips on them were banned. Like there was a couple of things that were they said, actually no, like this is just kind of going too far. What is your kind of opinion on some of those advances, not necessarily athletics but just across the board? And is it fair then to compare people in 20 years to people 50 years ago, or it's just totally different? Or it is anyway, because the time and science and everything changes anyways.
Yeah, I think the more time you kind of spend around sport and the older I get and all that, I think I'm more accepting of the new changes now, because you kind of look back through the history a bit more and go, oh, well, that changed then. And, we moved from cinder tracks to synthetic tracks, and there was always this. But I think what really upset a lot of people in athletics anyway was that Nike in 2016 had this prototype that was so much more effective. It was 4% improvement in running economy, which is about a 2 to 3% in performance, and you're talking, I don't know what's that, and I'm so bad at maths. It's probably a minute. It's basically between 1 or 2 minutes off a marathon time, and that's the difference generally at this level between coming 10th and coming first, And they handed out this prototype to not even all Nike athletes, just a very select group of Nike athletes at the last Olympics. And then that was happening for a good year afterwards. And that was really unfair, I think, because the rule at the time stated any shoe must be freely available. And this wasn't. This was just a little secret society that had this special shoe. And in World Athletics, essentially at the time, were asleep at the wheel. They didn't react to it. People were telling them, this is going on. We have to do something. We need new rules. And they kind of just let it happen. And then all the road running records started to get smashed to pieces. And then eventually now I think we do have a fair playing field. They've set new rules, and all the other brands, it's taken 2 or 3 years, but they've caught up to Nike. And there's not, I don't think anyone's going to really lose a race this week on the track because of what shoes they have in their feet, whereas that was the case 2 years ago at the World Championships in Doha. And it was definitely the case as well back in Rio in road running events when they had the super shoe. So now I'm kind of accepting of it now, but I think, I don't know what I was going to say there after that, but I think I've come to kind of, now that the playing field is relatively level, there's not such an unfairness factor, I suppose. So I'm kind of like, right, let's kind of carry on now and I suppose focus on the athletes, because for a long time it was kind of draining listening to the talk about the shoes so often, and people wouldn't even kind of credit the athletes and credit the performances.
Yeah, no, for sure. Obviously you're watching a lot of athletics, but what else have you been able to tune into? I've
been trying to tune into, I brought out this box there. I'm kind of been on all sorts of dodgy streams there on my laptop to try and find everything, from trying to tune into RTE and see what's happening at home and BBC streams and stuff. And since the athletics started, I've been primarily going to that. I'll try and get to Kelly's final now on Sunday morning, obviously, momentous event. I went to the rowing, and then I suppose I floated around when I had a bit of free time. See, I'm kind of like both the Independent and the Examiner, who I'd write for, have a staff writer out here, Brendan O'Brien and Sean McGoldrick. So they'd often go to the kind of main event of the day, which kind of, I suppose, leaves me being like a roving midfielder, and sort of I can go along if I want, or I can kind of pick stuff I want to do. And I did a bit of that the first week. I went to see Simone Biles on the night she opted out of the gymnastics, and which was a weird, I suppose, experience to see that and to be around that, just this global event. I went to the basketball, US men's basketball, and as I was tweeting, I think I was cursing some of the A-list stars, because I went to see the basketball, US men's basketball, they lost to France. I went to see Simone Biles, she pulled out. I went to see, who else did I go to see? I went to see Djokovic, and he won the game I saw, but he lost the game after him. And then the other one was I went to see Naomi Osaka, and she won the game I saw, and she lost the very next game. So I managed to, with my presence, spite 4 of the...
So maybe don't go to Kelly's fight.
That's what people were saying to me. They were like, don't go near the
I don't know.
That was very cool. And it was just surreal, because there was no one really at Djokovic, and I was literally sitting down the front row, and same with Osaka and stuff, and just hearing her talk to herself and cursing herself when she dumped the forehand into the net or something. And it was just like, God, this is... I don't know, you feel like their coach or something, because it was so eerily quiet, and you hear their kind of internal narrative they're telling themselves during the match and stuff. But very, very cool experience, I suppose, and thankfully I had a bit of spare time to be able to get to see that, because, I think every journalist starts out as a sports fan when we're teenagers, and as objective as you want to be. I hope I never lose that kind of wonderment and that kind of appreciation for events like this, where you can literally for free go to see Simone Biles do a vault, or go to see Kevin Durant throw a 3-point shot. You feel so lucky getting to do it.
I was going to basically ask you solely about the whole the nerdy writer of kind of the whole thing. So kind of give us, I suppose, an example of kind of what your kind of timelines would be like, especially obviously with the time difference. Do you find that you have to stay up a little bit longer in Japan to make deadlines here in Ireland? Or do you have to just put stuff out on the buzzer? I suppose what I'm trying to ask is, when kind of Warhol, does his thing, and he obviously is an hour, 2 hours later doing his press conference or whatever, how do you manage to fit that in, to make sure the demand here at home, so we can see exactly what you're going through as well?
Yeah, I think in the morning here, unless there's some of the editors who do the online stuff have been up burning the midnight oil back home. So we, if say for Kelly Harrington's fight there this morning, Sean McGoldrick was filing for the Independent, and one of the editors would have been up and putting his report up online once it was in at whatever it was, maybe 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning. But generally we do a good bit, you know, as the editor said to me, this is kind of going to be an online Olympics primarily. So a lot of us are just doing stories for online because it's so stale, kind of, you know, even with Kelly's case now, you know, her fight was whatever ridiculously early up this morning. Anyone who wants to read about it is probably going to read about it this afternoon online back in Ireland, or this morning. And then, you know, in tomorrow's papers, I think almost the narrative will probably turn to looking ahead to the final, I'd say almost. And yeah, so it's kind of been both really. It's both been doing online reports here during the day, but then occasionally, unfortunately, because of the time difference and because some of the newspapers mightn't decide until, like, you know, lunchtime or 3 or 4 p.m. What exactly they're doing with the papers the next day. They might get onto me then, which is like 11 at night. And I was actually climbing into bed last night at midnight for the first time. I went to bed here before 2 a.m. in the last 2 weeks, absolutely shattered. And then Shane Scanlon, the Independent, actually called me and just said, are you going to bed there yet? And he was like, we have a space there for 700 words. And I was like, of course I'll get up and do it. So I got up and wrote 800 words at about 12 to 1, half 1 in the morning and stuff, even though my eyes were falling out of my head. But yeah, there's been many nights basically I've been sitting in my room ready to go to bed and then been like, oh, here we are, and then been awake till 2 a.m. trying to write something for the following day's newspaper. So if the quality of writing is turned to absolute pot, there's probably at least I have a viable excuse.
Yeah, no, it is interesting to get that kind of insight. And I guess give us like an overview of kind of obviously Tokyo, but like your lifestyle in general, for, you know, people that might be interested in, you know, becoming journalists and sports journalists and what it's like, and if they like what the reality of it is, because, you know, someone might think, oh, that'd be lovely, but they may not be willing to stay up until 2 a.m. to do this. Or like, what's it like going to different events and, you know, you're going out, like, obviously, like, you've met lots of people kind of on the Irish circuit and, you know, that you get to know, like, do you need personality traits of being like quite outgoing, like going up and actually speaking to some of the athletes, or like creating bonds with, you know, people from, you know, other teams, whether it be Irish teams or from other countries as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure you could obviously tell people much probably better than me about all that sort of stuff as well. But I suppose to give my own, whatever insight I can. I think journalists in general range in terms of personality types. Like, obviously, it probably helps to be outgoing and nosy and chatty and stuff. But there's plenty of journalists I know who are extremely like socially awkward and introverted, and, you know, just like would be very uncomfortable walking up to someone and asking someone they don't know questions and stuff. And that's there also, like, that's not a negative, I think, in that field, like, because a lot of those kind of journalists are kind of more introspective and maybe have a lot more kind of better things to say about stuff than maybe the kind of loudmouth people who are talking to everyone. I don't know where I'd be. I'd probably be somewhere in the middle, really. I wouldn't be that outgoing, but I wouldn't be super quiet either. Like, and I suppose in terms of the reality of it, it's definitely not what your average mate at home kind of thinks it is, in terms of they see, I don't know, I might put a picture up on my Instagram or something of Djokovic or Osaka and they're like, you lucky bastard. And you're like, and then you're like, okay, it was cool and I was there for an hour, but then I had to go get on a media bus for 2 hours. And then, like, sitting in mixed zones is one of those things that just drains your life away. Like, so, like, a lot of times here, the majority, the first kind of 10 days or so, I'd be out of my hotel at, like, you know, 8 or 9 in the morning, and I'd get back at like midnight or so, and then I'd breathe some food down my gullet, and then maybe I have an hour or two of writing to do, and I'd be going to sleep at like 1 or 2 in the morning, and then it just goes again. And I would say, like, I'd be happy that the Olympics are not any longer than they are, you know, because it's happened to a lot of the journalists, like, so many run off 4 hours sleep, and that they're just almost, you know, I think I said to a friend there the other day, it was like, I couldn't be enjoying it more in terms of the sport and the chats and the work and all, but when it ends, I'll be quite happy that it's over, because I'm just like, it is quite exhausting at an event like this. And I think any journalist, I suppose, knows that, you know, big events like this, you know, they're typically once, twice, maybe 3 times a year. You do kind of go all out for them, and then it's not always like that, and you're happy to work like that for these few weeks. But it's I think any more than 2 weeks and there'd be a lot of nervous breakdowns amongst the media out here, because I think at this stage of it, a lot of them are running on fumes and stuff.
Talk to us, I suppose, a little bit about, like, as you said, like hopping on media buses, like kind of going to those, kind of things. I remember, I think I saw like another bunch of journalists who hadn't gone tweet basically saying, I've spent 50% of my life, hopping on a media bus. So for like kind of those who like don't understand, so like basically, like how do you obviously ship yourself to games? Like how do you, like what's the process, I suppose, of getting yourself to an Olympics and getting yourself that accreditation? Because that's kind of something I think even my brother was interested in, because he thought I would just get a ticket because I write with the Irish Times and then I'd be going, and I was like, no, it's like a process. So like explain that, I suppose, for like normal Joe Soaps who don't understand.
Yeah, it's quite, I think you can get, if you write a bit or do some sort of coverage of any one specific sport, you can get a sports specific pass for something out here. Like, so I don't know, if you have like a hockey website or a swimming website or something, or even a blog and stuff, it's quite easy a lot of times to get a sports specific pass. I suppose the Charlie, what was I saying? Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the kind of golden ticket is the kind of all-round pass. That's the e-media pass. There's a limited amount of them where you can go to anything. I got that this time in Rio. I had a sports-specific one for athletics. I suppose I just got that this time because I've done more work for a lot of different outlets and I suppose more sports in the interim few years. And there might be probably one or two of them. So the Irish Times would have two. The Independent might have two. I don't know, RTE obviously have a lot, and each of the kind of the Sun, the Star, the Daily Mail, they'd all maybe have one of those kind of accreditations, and it'd be just who they give it out to. And yeah, it's basically given out through the Olympic Federation of Ireland. They would make an assessment on, I suppose, the biggest outlets that the biggest newspapers or websites, whatever it be, would get preference for where their allotment of accreditations goes, and then you have to apply way in advance. Like it's probably a year and a half in advance. So anyone who's out there listening to this, I'd say get on in a few months' time, probably send an email and try and find out about Paris 2024 when that process starts, because it'll definitely be in probably at some point in 2022 that'll start happening. And yeah, then I suppose once you get out here, like I'm freelance, so I kind of get a lot of staff writers obviously will get their expenses paid. I normally pay my own way to a lot of these things when I go to them, and this time it was obviously like I would be broke and penniless if I paid for everything this time. So I kind of got a contribution for both the Indo and Examiner towards the expenses. Obviously it helps writing for both, because then they're both happy to chip in and stuff and help cover your costs and stuff, and then just basically work your ass off when you're out here then and turn a good profit and all that. And yeah, I suppose that's how it works then. It's all, I suppose, an economy of scale. Then you want to do as much work as you can, but at times you do ask yourself, and even in the last couple of days, I've kind of said to myself, like, I need to start saying no to some stuff, because you can end up in a lot of demand. And if you say yes to everything, like I said, you can be running off 3 or 4 hours sleep. And I kind of would like, now that I have my freedom for the last 4 days, to actually go out and see the odd thing in Tokyo and not just come home and tell friends and family that in 3 weeks in Tokyo, all you saw was the inside of stadiums and the inside of your hotel room. Even though that's cool.
What's been like, I suppose, like a
no, it's a good insight for sure.
No, go on, Niamh.
You're okay. Sorry, the delay is a bit funny. What was I going to say? Sorry. Yeah, we have obviously another few Irish athletes like ready to go. We have a few people in action in that. Who will you be tuning into, and who do you think the athletes we should be watching out for are? Yeah, I think in terms of athletics, I suppose the Andrew Coscoran is going this evening. I suppose maybe by the time it's out, he'll have already raced, but he'll be interesting. He probably won't make the final. Famous last words from me there. Hope he does now, despite me. But I think in the marathons, I think one of the most underrated athletes in Irish sport is Fionnuala McCormack. I mean, she's just a legend, she's 36 years old, the most capped Irish female athlete ever. And because she hates doing interviews and hates attention, she's so not nearly as well known as she would be if she kind of committed to that sort of lifestyle and, wanted to ever become an influencer and stuff. And she's quiet, she's humble, and she just lets her performances do the talking. So I'll really be looking forward to seeing how she does in the marathon. She hasn't raced in a year and a half, so no one knows what fitness she is in, but just knowing Fionnuala, I went to college with her, she wouldn't be here if she wasn't going to be competitive. She was 20th in Rio.
in the marathon, and I think she can be top 20 again. And then I suppose Brendan Boyce will be interesting to see in the 50k walk. If athletics is to win a medal, he's the best chance, because, you know, he was always the best chance, really. 6th at the World Championships in 2019. Loves horrible conditions. Not that he loves them, but just he dislikes them less than everyone else. And it's 34 degrees at the moment in Sapporo, where the race walks and marathons are being held. And in a 50k event, 34 degrees or 30-something degrees, whatever it is for the race, will be absolute carnage. And when the going gets tough, he really does get going. Like, so he'll be interesting to watch as well. And then last event of the day, I suppose, then is last event in the athletics program is the marathon on Saturday night Irish time around 11:30 p.m. I think it is. And I suppose from an international perspective, Eliud Kipchoge, the marathon king, I mean, he's probably already the greatest marathoner of all time, but if he wins that, he's just going to be immortal, I suppose. And then 3 Belfast men, Stephen Scullion, Kevin Seward and Paul Pollock. You know, top 20 would be great for them if they can get it. And Aoife Cook is also going in the women's marathon as well, alongside Fionnuala. Again, probably won't be top 20, but again, one of those athletes who just being here, it's brilliant. And if she could get top 40 or 50, it'd be brilliant as well. And then I suppose from a broad perspective, it's all about the countdown to Kelly on Sunday morning. Like everyone, I think the whole nation will be bright-eyed, bushy-tailed that morning, absolute wired to the hilt. Yeah. Like, because I mean, she's up against Beatrice Ferreira. It's probably a big underdog. I don't know what the betting is, but I'd imagine she's an underdog from talking to the people who know boxing pretty well. But I mean, what an achievement for her, silver medal. She's just gonna, like, I mean, everyone says this, but I think with Kelly, it literally couldn't happen to a nicer person. Like, you know, she makes fanboys and fangirls out of every skeptic journalist in the world, like, you know, because you can't have a conversation or even listen to an interview with Kelly Harrington without just coming away thinking, like, what an absolute legend she is. Like, so she'll be one I'll very much admit that I'm not being objective, and I'm literally just hoping to see her go for gold.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, look, everybody, as you said, is looking forward to Kelly, and I agree with you. Like, I think Fionnuala McCormick is phenomenal, and obviously, you know, she's had really good results before, so it would be great to see you know, her coming away with a good performance. Natalia Coyle also started off very well this morning in the modern pentathlon, so she's currently sitting 3rd after the fencing, and she finished 9th and 6th previously, so she said she's aiming to improve by 3 places again, which will get her onto the podium, which would be amazing for her. But yeah, it's kind of like most of the Irish athletes really have been out and in action at this stage. You know, it's been highs and lows. I think everybody keeps saying in terms of, look, we have medals. But it has been you know, difficult for some of the performances. Obviously you're on the ground. We're gutted for Ciara. Did you get to talk to Ciara? How's she doing? An injury, you know, in a time like this, you know, given she's so much hard work gone in, and she was in great form last year. What did you make of that?
With Ciara, I mean, again, your heart she was one of those athletes, and there's been so many of them in the last 2 weeks that your heart just breaks, and you almost feel guilty as a journalist having to stand there and ask them questions and try to reflect and even say something positive when there's nothing positive a lot of times to be said. Because it exemplifies the cruelty of this stage and the kind of occasional cruelty of the Olympics, whereby, you know, you have a lot of these athletes are kind of once a year in the limelight, and then it's once every 4 years in the real limelight. The guy next door knows about them sort of performances. And that was the case, obviously, for Ciara. And like, she's been to 2 Olympics now. The first one, she wasn't really the athlete she is now at the first one 5 years ago. She was probably only really semi-final caliber then at that point in her career. But now she's definitely a high caliber athlete enough to be in the top 10, the top 8 maybe in a women's 1500 meter final. She obviously proved it in Doha, finishing 10th in the final. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people here were like, she can definitely finish like 8th, and maybe if things go her way, get up to like 5th, 6th, 7th, something like that, and it would have been unbelievable if she could. But again, just maybe it was something as simple as the humidity or the heat or the dehydration or whatever, or maybe it was just pure bad luck or something, but tore her calf 8 days before her heat. And as she said, being a physio herself was almost a negative in that situation, because she knew with that injury it takes 2 weeks of rest before you can run again. She had 8 days. She gave it 5 days of rest, Monday to Friday, and then did some running on Saturday and Sunday to test it out. And as she said, she had to give it a go. You know, she wasn't going to have, like, she couldn't give the place to anyone else at that point. It was too late. And she said she would have felt bad if she didn't at least get on the line, having taken someone else's place. So she gave it a go. But even watching the race, I was up in the stands with Jared O'Donnell, and I kind of just said to him after 2 laps, even though she was up the front, I said, like, that doesn't look like the normal Ciara. You know, you can just tell when you've watched her over the years, there's kind of a bounce in her stride when she's running well, and it wasn't there. She looked flat, and kind of, I suppose that was borne out by the last lap once the gears changed, like the air just went out of her tires, like, and I think what's good though in a situation like hers, you know, it's not as if, I think for someone like Sunita Paspore, it's so much harder to take given the age profile, whereby you know that this was your medal chance, and you know the odds are that it's going to be too long to replicate it in Paris. But for Ciara and athletes like Ciara, you know, she's still in her 20s. She's 28 now, if I remember right. Like it's nothing to Paris in 3 years. She can be at her peak as a 1500 meter runner at the age of 31. And for, especially in athletics, there's because of the backlog during the pandemic, there's both the European Championships and a World Championships next year in the space of a few weeks. And there's the Commonwealth Games as a Northern Irish person. So there's no reason Ciara can't be sitting down the next few weeks and thinking, right, I can win a European medal again next year, and I can make a world final and maybe finish top 8 next year. So it's a serious, I suppose, carrot for them to go after now for the winter, that, you know, there'll always be a come down. There'll always be a bit of kind of, not sulking, but I suppose a low level downer, I suppose, for a while. But that's a hell of a thing to have to turn their attention to now. So yeah, there's going to be lots of good days ahead again in Ciara Mageean's Ciara Mageean's career. But I think the last week will be one she wants to forget very quickly.
Yeah, no, I definitely think look, it was really unlucky, but you know, obviously I think she had maybe a little bit of time to come to terms with it, and like you said, like, she obviously went out. I thought she looked like she was kind of grabbing it by the scruff of the neck, but if you actually watch it back, when they are kind of doing the camera in each person's face, she doesn't smile as much as she kind of normally does, and she looks a little bit uncomfortable, and you're kind of like, all right, so she obviously knows something. I know at that point she hadn't really shared it with that many people, and then like you said, like last 200 meters, that was just kind of it done, where you kind of thought, like, okay, she's actually put herself in a good position here. But look, like you said, loads more to come for her. She's been in great shape in kind of the last kind of 18 months. You know, we know she's seeking some more records, and there's some more good performances. Yes, one of the unlucky Irish athletes, I think, that has, you know, been working so hard and has the potential to do it, but just didn't get it this time around. We know that you're pressed for time, so thanks a million for taking the time to chat to us, and enjoy the next couple of days and the explorations. We look forward to seeing some stuff on Instagram or something where you can show us what Tokyo actually looks like.
Thank you very much, and hopefully if you ever want to, feel free to give me a shout anytime, and I might have a few more Tokyo stories to tell at some point when I'm less pressed for time. So thanks a million for having me.
No worries. Thanks a million, Cathal.
Cheers. See you again. Bye-bye.